Welcome back. We're working on the second project now, and I want to start a new background. So I went to the File menu to New, and I'm going to make an image that's 10 by 8 by 100 pixels per inch in RGB color. Once I've got that open, I've searched for some images for the Dadaist piece, and I've found some images that are old-looking as well as some newer images. I'm going to want to combine those together. So we'll download them as high-res as possible. I'm going to talk a little bit about transforming and sizing the images once we get them in. So what I'll do is open several of these images in Photoshop, so either using Open with Photoshop or dragging them to Photoshop's icon if you're on a Mac. One thing we don't want to do is open them and drag them onto our background file. So we'll notice with Photoshop, we're working with multiple images now. I've got my new background, and each image is a separate tab. I find it easier to drag these apart, and you can cascade all of the windows separately. Or another easy way to combine the images is to select all, and then copy the image. This is probably the simplest way, and then paste it into our background. So keep in mind we want to have 3 focal points, but we want to have more than 3 images. So first thing I'll do is just gather all my images and bring them into Photoshop, and they should look like they're hand cut and paste out of a newspaper. So again, select all, copy, and then paste. You'll notice that some of the images are going to be larger because they were higher resolution from the internet where I got them than they will be in Photoshop. So I'll grab some of the other images and again drag them to Photoshop's icon. One thing you do not want to do, just to demonstrate this, is to drag them directly to your background. That will be fine, but if you notice this big X in the middle, it means that it's a smart layer and it's vector-based essentially. We can't manipulate it the way we want to. So if you get that big X, hit the Escape key and don't place it, and I'll open this in Photoshop, dragging it to the icon or using File Open to get it in there. And I can select other regions of it as well. I don't need to get the whole thing. I can use the Square Marquee tool. And we notice with the marquee tools, that limits the area that I'm affecting with Photoshop. So when I select that square, that's the only area that it's concerned with now. So I'll copy that area and then go back to my background and then paste it. So when I paste it, I notice it's larger than my image. If you have really high resolution images, you can go to File, to Free Transform. And notice if the image is bigger than the area, you might have to zoom out a little bit so you can see the corners. One thing that's very important when you're resizing the image is not to distort it. You can escape the last thing you did, or hit the undo the last thing you did, or hit the Escape key to get out of it. So again, I'll use Edit, Free Transform. We only want to use the corners and hold the Shift key while you're dragging. Another option is to use this little chain link so that it's restricting the height and width proportions. And I'll double click it to set the transform. You'll notice if you move your mouse outside of the edges, it lets you rotate the image as well. So I'm going to just pull a bunch of images in here, and now I'll close these other tabs. And continue to open a few other images that I'll bring in to demonstrate a few other techniques. So it's really the simplest way to get the images into Photoshop. Again, select all, copy it, and paste it into your background. Again, here's an image. It's really large. I'll use Edit, Free Transform, and zoom out to show the whole thing. Holding the Shift key, I'll reduce it. So we want to create a Dadaist collage that looks like it was cut out of paper with all of those sort of topics: war, politics, famine. The Dadaists were concerned about the world around them and thought that art should talk about the concerns of the world. To erase parts of this image, if I wanted to get rid of parts of this, I could use the eraser tool, and I would just select a very large, hard brush. And if you hold the Shift key after first click, it keeps it to a straight line. So this way you can make it look like it was cut out of a newspaper with a pair of scissors. We don't want it to look digital. We want it to look analog as possible. So again, I'll click, hold the Shift key, move to where I want the line to end, and then connect the line. So we notice that as I bring each image in, each tab has its own set of layers. Right, here's the background for this image. Here are all of the images that I dragged into my background. And we can change the stacking order so that some images are in front of other images. We recall that the top of the palette is the closest to our eye. So to make this look a little more chaotic and hand cut and paste, I would, again, rotate some of the things, move them around a little bit. I'll get rid of this gear. We also want these photos to look old and kind of from the 1920s, even if they're more contemporary imagery. So I'll open this other image by dragging to Photoshop's icon. And I want to erase parts of this background, perhaps, before I bring it over. So we can talk about some other ways to select. Page 18 in the Reader covers selections. Aside from the square marquee, which lets you choose just a small area, and then copy that, go to the background and paste it. There's several other ways I can erase from this. So once I've got it there, again, the simple way is just to use the eraser tool, keep it kind of straight edges, hard lines, make it look like it was cut with a pair of scissors. I'll get rid of this layer to demonstrate another technique. Once I've got the image, to make more perfect selections, I can use the lasso tool. So the lasso allows me to draw a shape around the edge of the image. Behind the lasso tool is a polygon lasso tool, which you can switch to by holding the Alt key on Windows or Option on the Mac. So I can single click to get a corner. And then notice if you click on the first point, it closes the line, or hit the Enter key. So now I've only selected Posney himself. I'll copy that and paste it into the background. But we're not concerned with making really accurate selections in this project so much. We want it to look like it was hand cut and pasted out of a paper or a magazine. We can also use the Image Adjustments menu and use Desaturate to make this black and white. Likewise, I can use Image Adjustments and Hue Saturation. Be very careful to click this Colorize button, and you can apply a single hue to the image, again, making it look like a decayed or old image, like a daguerreotype or a cyanotype. And adjust the saturation to make it look kind of faded. So we want to create something that has 3 focal points. So we've got several images, but we want to gather it together. And before I go any further, I'm going to save it as a PSD file. So make sure to save your layers when you turn them in as a PSD. As you can see, it doesn't take a whole lot of time once we understand how layers work and moving images between these tabs to put the images together. The thing that will take some time is really refining or manipulating this collage. So I'll grab some of these other files that I have, and again, if we drag them right to the background, we get these big X's, so don't do that. Hit the Escape key and get out of that. We'll want to use File, Open, or drag these to Photoshop's icon, or right-click and tell it to open with Adobe Photoshop. So an image like this is a little easier to manipulate. I'll select all, notice the marching ants, copy it, and then close that, going back to my background, and paste it. Again, this image was very big. We noticed that the original image in inches wasn't so big, but it was much higher in resolution, or pixels per inch. So I'll shrink this down. And then, in order to erase the background with an image like this, I can use a handy tool that's behind the eraser called the magic eraser. Oh, it's magic. So I'll click on the background and it erases that background. Again, I can change the stacking order of the layers by moving them around. And the layer on the top is closest to our eye. The layers behind it are being hidden by the other objects. So again, to colorize my layer here, I'll use Image Adjustments, Hue Saturation, and click the Colorize button, maybe reduce the saturation just a little bit. So choose 2 or 3 colors like a faded blue or a faded yellow to make it look like an old photograph. I'll save what I'm working on again and continue to grab a few more items. So grab, again, this image, open it with Photoshop. Another way to move the images together is you can drag the tabs apart. The problem when you do that is now I've lost my clock behind the other ones, so I can find that in the window menu. Then I'll use the Move tool to move the pixels of the image from one into the other. Again, using the magic eraser and single click. Notice if it erases too much, you can change the tolerance. So the lower the tolerance, the fewer colors that it will erase, and that way it's not erasing everything. So I'll move this down. You'll see it didn't erase the part above the ringer, so I'll use the magic eraser tool again. And once more, I'll move that layer up in the stacking order. So we want to utilize variety of scale, some big things, some small things, and think about the kind of 3 focal points that we're creating here, having some big things, some small things, some round things, maybe kind of grouping things into focal points. Notice when you're transforming, you can't do anything until you double-click or get out of the transformation. So putting the images in Photoshop won't take very long. Really fine-tuning and manipulating the composition so that it has 3 focal points might be the thing we spend some time on. If you do use some text, and you're welcome to use old newspapers, things of the nature, again, just to review, I'll select it with the square marquee tool, just a little bit of it, and then copy that image and paste it. Again, I can colorize that using Image Adjustments, Hue Saturation, and I'll show some more advanced ways perhaps later. Would want to use Free Transform and rotate it a little bit. I'll drag it behind the other layers. So the Move tool lets us move things around. Be mindful of which layer you have selected at the moment. Notice I can also use the Magic Eraser tool to clean up the background behind Hosni's head. There we go. And the tip of this tool is the little corner of the eraser. If you do use text made in Photoshop, try to make it look like it was hand cut out of a newspaper. So to do this, again, I can use the marquee tool. So I'll use the polygon and make a rough selection, just single clicking